You may be seated. A human life is holy. A human life is holy in its beginning, in its becoming, and in its dying. Today we celebrate and remember a holy life. We come together in relationship and shared memory to mourn the death and celebrate the life of Garl Coleman Rieke, spouse, father, brother, uncle, colleague, and dear friend. And as we do so, we remember that we gather on the homelands of the Dakota and the Ojibwe nations. We honor with gratitude the people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations and their ongoing contributions to this region. We do this to interrupt the legacy of injustices against these nations, beginning with acts of healing and honest storytelling. This is the commitment of this faith community and of the Rieke family. Garl's death saddens us all. He was loving, cantankerous, thoughtful, and generous. Yet in the midst of our sorrow, we gather to find our feet again, to offer each other comfort, to share our grief and our pain, and to listen to the stories of a life that was deeply loving, determined, giving, gruff, resilient, and woven through and through with some central questions. What makes for health within the human body, but also in the greater circles of humanity? How do we get along with one another? How do we live out what we say we believe? We hold cherished memories of our days with Garl, the loving relationships, the no-nonsense, making things work kind of energy, the joys, the travel, the funny sayings, and the commitments. May we draw strength from this coming together, reminding one another that we are not alone, but in the company of all those who have known love and those who have known sorrow. We gather to bid Garl farewell, to seek comfort, and to say yes, once again, to life's greatest expression, which is love. And now, will you join me in the words for the lighting of the chalice? You will find them in your order of service. Time of grief, we light a flame of sharing, the flame of ongoing life. In this time, when we search for understanding and serenity in the face of loss, we light this sign of our quest for truth, meaning, and community. And now I will ask Monique and Megan to join me on the chancel.
Thank you, friends and family of the Rieke family, for being here. I'm Stuart's wife, Monique, and my daughter, Megan Senni, is here with me today. Megan and I are Ojibwe, and Stuart's son, Wesson, is Dakota, and we honor the tradition of smudging, which is a cleansing ceremony. Typically, we use 3 different purification forms in sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. And today we're smudging with cedar and sage. And so as we say goodbye to Garl, we know that his love of our cultures and his grandchildren was great. And so we honor Garl today by a cleansing ceremony. As Megan lights the sage and cedar, she'll go around the room in a circle, and feel free to go ahead and smudge yourself. So in our way, in the Native American way, and particularly our Ojibwe ways, we do everything in a circle because it represents the medicine wheel. And so, as I was once told by a spiritual leader here in Minnesota, that the circle of life is that you begin as a child, as a baby from your mother's womb, and you know nothing yet. Of course, scientists like Garl believe that we're born with a certain amount of intelligence in us, and that inherently becomes real once you become more educated in life. And so today, we began, as I explained, we begin as a child, and as you go through life, sometimes as you get dementia or Alzheimer's, it's explained that you return to that life as a child, and that you are then whole again. And so this is what I think about when I think about my father-in-law, who was truly an interesting man of strong beliefs of his own, and we honor that with him here today. Thank you.
Rise as you are able to join in our opening hymn, Amazing Grace. may be seated. We are each and all a part of a great mystery. We do not know where we come from when we are born. We do not know where we go when we die. What we do know is the life we live between these two eternities, on either side of being born and having to die. Some of us call this mystery source of life. Some of us call the mystery God. Some of us call the mystery spirit of love, or simply love. Some of us do not know what to call the mystery, for all names seem somehow inadequate. Today we begin by lighting a candle for the mystery of which we are all a part. Of mystery, we light a candle of memory for the life of Garl Coleman Rieke. You can stay right there. Just go. This flame is fragile. Still, flame kindles flame, and life kindles life. So long after the flame is extinguished or consumed, the flame still burns. So too, a human life. If you stare at a flame and then look away, or even shut your eyes, the eye remembers the light, just as the heart remembers a person who has died. And so, in remembrance and in honor of Garl's light and life, we light these flames. Thank you. Kathleen, would you like to come forward?
Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of grazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. But since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than a day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity.
Just want to say that it might be possible to say that my dad was more of a man of action than words. He built things for us and always was good, with things you might think are practical, but he was a man of words. He was a teacher, and he always practiced his lessons, and I guess that plays into me writing and reading this poem that I wrote. It's called The Doorstep. You let us sit with you on the doorstep. We watch street kids play stickball with no score kept. Your grandkids jump chalk art playing hopscotch. Hummingbirds and sparrows want us to keep watch. The brown Toyota you drove parked by the sidewalk. We held the golden key to your old bike lock. The whole fish market you hooked on the side street. Salmon are good, but lake trout you can't beat. In different cities as we sit all day. New Orleans, Nashville, Philadelphia, LA. A blizzard kicks up in Grand Forks, ND. Air conditioning in Texas gets a little spendy. And now the doorstep is at the old farm. September fishing, damn mosquitoes swarm. Winking fireflies in the dusk blue. San Diego orangutans at the big zoo. A farting contest with our Grandpa Fred. Sitting on buckets with co-op pet caps on your heads. The doorstep, I noticed, is a little like birth. We get to wonder at long life's worth. The doorstep helps us gather and wait. Is life random with God or with blind fate? Body functions ebb and flow like a sea tide. The doorstep earthquakes are a rough ride. We're proud to be around you at the doorway. Don't worry, we will never ever go away. And when you're ready, just put on your walking boots. Don't trip on the forest you planted with deep, strong roots. Soon no pain will follow you inside the door, and you'll fish with Grandpa out by South Shore. We might not wait here too much longer. Beyond the doorstep, we'll all feel stronger. You entered the world in Seattle, a diabetic warrior father, you lived a battle. You'll just rest, no need for heaven's elevator. The doorstep's back to the Creator.
Beloved poet and Celtic mystic John O'Donohue writes, "When you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some deed echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Your heart grows heavy, and though this loss has wounded others too, no one knows what has been taken from you when silence of absence happens and deepens. There are days when you wake up happy and times when you are thrown back on the black tide of death. And all you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to it. Each of us have our own goodbyes, our own journey with grief. And so we light a candle for grief." For joy. At death, each of us will have our own goodbyes, our own journey with grief. Grief is not so much a psychological thing as it is a whole body experience, a whole person experience. It is deeply felt in our bodies. There's some things that we should know about grief. There is no one right way to grieve. Garl's death will have and affect us each differently, and our grief will take shape differently too. We know there is sadness and memory, wanting to be alone and needing to be with people. There will be times when the loss is felt fresh and raw, and other times when we just feel numb. We know that there will be moments when we feel taken off guard, surprised by the depth of our sorrow or the breadth of our gratitude. There may be times that feel quite strange, times we experience emotions that don't seem to fit, perhaps guilt, maybe anger, incredible longing for something different, and maybe relief, or perhaps a surprising moment of realization and healing. However your grief comes, may we practice mercy with ourselves and others, allowing the memories to come. And when they do, making room for the emotions that will rise and fall. We grieve because we care. Sorrow and joy are woven fine, and our mourning is bound up with the joys and pleasures, the gratitude and grace at having loved Garl, of getting the chance to live and love alongside him, this beloved man. Garl's death invites us all to awaken into our own lives, to live more deeply, to live more joyfully, and perhaps to even change the way we live, to savor and to love with all of our hearts. And so today we lit a candle for grief and for joy, because joy and grief are woven fine. And now we have a list of some favorite dad sayings.
All right. Those who knew Garl, which is most people in this room, very well, they know, as my brother mentioned earlier, he was actually a man of words. In this case, there were certain things that he would say over the year. Some things, a lot of these he repeated, and in whatever domain it was that you may have known him, you may have heard some of these. I've sort of collected this from all those that I knew of or that I could think of. And I was trying to think of a overall term to encompass all these things, and it's just not possible. Like, some of them maybe are aphorisms, some of them are proverbs, some of them are sayings, but something on this list will defy like every one of those. So I came up with this finally this morning. I'm calling it Garl's Quotes and Figurative Expressions. So anyways, I'll put a little clarification on some of these, I suppose. The first one here is all over hell's half acre. That was one that I heard from medical students, and I heard him say that as well. And then some of these are single words also. Some of them are an expression followed by a question. Anyways, we'll get to it. The next one was a sort of a pet term that he had for the grandchildren, mugwumps. So if anyone knows the actual meaning of that, I'll be impressed. Because it is an actual word. It's like a political term of some sort. But anyways, the next one here, knob twisting. That is a special one for, yes. It included hand gestures too, like this. And if Garl felt like he was being pushed in ways that he didn't want to go or, I don't know, or didn't agree with, stop knob twisting. Anyways, next. You know the expression. Next, he would ask, where do you let a 600-pound gorilla sleep? Then he'd answer the question for you, any damn where it wants to. Usually he was referring to me when he was brought that up, or someone similar to me. The next one was a good one. Keep your nose to the grindstone. His words. Of encouragement. To keep studying and persevere. The next one, not to be blasphemous, but this was another one he liked to use in medical school classes. read the next one?
I can just read through them.
Okay.
You want to read it?
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one was not a classic Unitarian thing to say, but kind of a churchy defiant thing. He would always say, Jesus was a haploid. Do you know what a haploid is? He just said things that, I don't know, that one was a little defiant, but oh well. Then he would say, hopping around like a fart in a skillet. That was if kids were jumping around. This one was reserved for, I don't know, different politicians often. He would say, he's a stone.
And then if they were a step above that, you might say they're an ambulatory stone. Stone capable of walking around.
A walking stone.
You can read the next one. 'Cause
The
runs
next
in your
one
family.
was referred to specifically by my stepson, Junior, my stepson. He said to my grandma, damn it, I like the boy. One time when I was sick, and he didn't know really, but I said, well, Dad, would you go get me a drink? And he said, damn it, you've got legs, use them.
He said that in a lot of other occasions.
Yeah, a lot of
as
other
well.
times.
And the next one here is another one related to science. And if you know the answer to this, anyways, he'd say, if something was very unorganized, he'd say, that's about as organized as a solenoid. Then he'd follow up with, do you know what a solenoid is? If you don't know, it's a single-celled organism, kind of like an amoeba, so it's a big mess.
Not that organized.
Yeah. The next one, not to be blasphemous again, it was like the equivalent of thank you, Captain Obvious, but what do you like to say is the Pope a Catholic? And then his ode to flatulence. This is another quote here that a certain person probably knows better than everyone because he witnessed it.
Two
Yeah.
people.
Two people.
Yeah.
Watch your step.
That was after a fart.
And of course, I've got one for you, Fred.
Again, referring to a fart.
Then sometimes when he's upset, he would say something like, piss up a rope. Then these next two here are ones that I noticed he gave up saying probably after we lived in Grand Forks, where we had the worst of every kind of weather. You can read.
Say cold, you don't know what cold is. Hot, you don't know what hot is.
Then he heard this one quite often, deader than a doornail. And the last one we'll say
Yeah.
here. Off we go, faster than a herd of wounded turtles. I'm sure there's more, but what we got now.
Death has a strange way of sorting out the essentials of life. And we see clearly, though, through our tears, what really matters. Family and friends, friends who are like family, communities built and sustained over the years. The real of reality is relationship. And this is a central fact of science and the gospel of all the great religions. It is from this community forming power that we live and have our being. We are in this life together, and so we light a candle for community. As part of memorial services at Unity Church, we often collect stories of loved ones who have died in order to capture the many different facets of that person, the many biographies that they lived, the various communities in which they lived. And today we share some of those stories with you, and this is just a sampling of some of the things that were sent to me. From Ruth Yip, Judy's cousin. Garl reminds me of Chaucer's clerk, a scholar who, quote, gladly would learn and gladly teach, end quote. When we visited in 2019, Garl plunged into sharing his knowledge of radio-controlled airplanes with my son Stefan after he had explained and explored the primordial world of dinosaurs with my daughter, Rachel. He shared his interest with everyone, little kids or adults, whether it was in birds, fishing, travel, or the human brain. He was not only a scholar, but a builder, a man of action. He built houses for those birds and houses for the books. He went far beyond Chaucer's poor clerk in his travels, both in books and out in the world on the Rhodes Scholar treks. What an adventurer. And from Pat Half, Unity staff member and church member. I have fond memories of Garl's steadfast presence in many of the Unity Church pilgrimages to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Garl's participation often set an example for others to embrace the uncertainties of those trips. He quietly demonstrated an ability to completely focus on an unfamiliar building task and persevere to its completion. I truly welcomed his patience and wry sense of humor as we all navigated the unpredictabilities of group living. I experienced Garl as someone who was always open to learning more about the many injustices faced by the people of New Orleans. And I am very grateful for those days we spent learning and loving with Carl Rieke. And from Kevin Byrne, a friend from the condo, we all know so well of Garl's meticulous crafting of model airplanes, his being the kind that actually can be flown. My history of model making, too, was airplanes, though from plastic kits. Loved that Duco cement, neglected to ask Garl what he thought of it, and I won't tell OSHA if you don't. A story from Eric Rieke. I spent the spring of 2001 at my parents' home in Grand Forks, North Dakota, studying at UND. One afternoon, while I was at home, my father walked by sharing with me a bit of random information regarding the medical student group he was working with at the time. He had a long-standing tendency of doing such things. And I usually remembered the tidbits he would share, even though I generally deemed them as irrelevant. So Garl says, I have a cowgirl from Wyoming in my group named Kathleen. Don't call her Kathy. Ha, ha, ha. He chuckled as he passed by, to which I made no response. In the spring of 2005, I began dating a first-year neurology resident at the U of M who had gone to medical school at UND. She was originally from the state of Wyoming. One of the first things she told me was her name was Kathleen, not Kate, not Katie, not Kathy. Definitely not Kathy. I understood then that my father had informally introduced me to her one random afternoon some 4 years earlier. A year later, we married. From a former student, Dr. Katie Spickel-Wiegner. I'm sure I mangled that name, sorry. Garl was definitely one of a kind. His varied interests and hobbies were always interesting to learn and hear about, and undoubtedly kept his mind sharp. His mentorship and friendship throughout my undergraduate and med school years won't be forgotten. May we all aspire to a fulfilling and impressive career and life such as Garl's. And from Megan Sinney, Garl's granddaughter, I'll always remember Garl's many stories and the way he told them, which were funny and truthful. Garl saying that someone was a you-know-what, which would mean a few things depending on the story he was telling. His quick smiles for pictures and his impressive memory and knowledge will always stay with me. And from Ross, Rieke, Garl's brother, my brother Garl was an exceptional fisherman. 48-pound king salmon, Straits of Juan de Fuca. Sea perch of the Pacific coast, 6-pound trout, Green Lake, Seattle. He drained the lakes of Canada above North Dakota, and a 13-pound steelhead from the Ship Canal between Lake Union and Puget Sound. Need I say this? We ate really well. Be there a heaven above, we all know he's fishing next to JC and the boys. And from Stuart Rieke, Garl's son. This story starts with another story about my father. He could be fierce, but was in essence a kind, loving man. Therefore, it's necessary to tell two stories to get to the one man. The first involves fierceness, the I like that boy story. My grandmother, Rieke, could be finicky about people's behavior, especially young adults. Not judgmental per se, but particular. I don't remember then what my then 12-year-old stepson Junior said, but my grandmother started saying something to my dad about the boy. She said, the boy, a couple more times, pecking at my dad's consciousness. Pecking, 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 until my dad, his fist thumping the table, exclaimed, I like that boy. Thereupon, my grandmother did not critique the boy any further. Thereupon, a legendary defense of a person my dad quickly started caring about became a story that would be shared often between myself and my wife. Maybe Junior doesn't recall this story, but this was my dad's fierceness. Yet this same man, fierce, even grouchy, tough as nails at times, appearing like he could snap off a finger if one of them presented to him too closely, also forgave and had compassion. He pretty much forgave me instantly when in Stockholm on the farm when I accidentally backed the car over the only cat that he ever not only tolerated but actually seemed to feel affection for. And I just felt horrible. I had just noticed that day how much he seemed to like that poor kitten. And here I had run over the only cat my dad ever really enjoyed of all the cats on the farm. All he said was, well, those things happen. They especially happen here on the farm. He smiled wistfully and never took to any other cat in his life. This was the kind, loving man that was my father. He could show a tough, fierce fire if somebody he liked was poked at, but he could also respond so kindly in moments of fear and crisis and remorse. What makes for health? How might we live into the true meaning of health as in wholeness? A being whole, sound, or well? How can we get along with one another? How can we encourage wholeness of community? These were central interlocking questions in Garl Rieke's life and work. What makes for health and wholeness in my own body, in the body of my family, in the body of my communities? From a very young age, Garl was confronted with questions of health. A diagnosis of type 2 diabetes at the age of 3.5 in the mid-1940s was a serious and life-threatening diagnosis. Diabetes involved all kinds of restrictions, measurements of food intake, insulin shots, and a strict adherence to schedules for Garl. It was also a central life-shaping experience that nurtured his dedication to science, to medicine, and working hard to solve problems. Garl and his brother Ross, who was also a diabetic, lived and thrived under the watchful eye of their mother Elizabeth and father Harry in Seattle, Washington. His mother, a first-generation Hungarian, managed her boys' health with strict rules and tough love. She instilled a deep regard in them for their own health and the health of their community as they watched her help new immigrants displaced by the Hungarian Revolution in the mid-1950s. Elizabeth acted as an interpreter for the new arrivals and taught her boys to respect people from other countries with different perspectives and gifts and cultures. At one point in Garl's childhood, Elizabeth was awarded Mother of the Year, an acknowledgement of what she was doing inside and outside their home. And from all accounts, she didn't mince words and she didn't hesitate to help. Garl was named after his father's best friend, Garl Schultz. Harry Rieke had wanted to join the Air Force in World War II, but was turned down for medical reasons. So the next best thing was naming his son after his dear friend who had died in battle. Garl's father was an aeronautical engineer working for Boeing Company in test flights, so there was always lots of talk about planes and constructing model airplanes together. This beloved and troublesome name would cause Garl endless amounts of consternation and grief as he explained once again that indeed he did know how to spell his own name. And yes, his name was Garl, not Carl. Thank you very much. As a young boy, Garl loved to fish off the loch between Lake Union and the Pacific. He would ride the bus to the loch and sit with the old men there. One time landing a huge fish that caused all kinds of upset with the old guys who had sat there all day with nothing to show for it. Garl wasn't a great student. He nearly flunked out of his first year of college, and it took him 5 years to get to his undergraduate degree. But he was persistent. He was resilient. Lessons taught with precision and cunning by his disease. He met Judy in psychology class in the last year of his undergraduate and her junior year. They had been assigned a reading from the library, and they were both vying for the same book. It made for interesting friction between them, and they started as friends, but by the end of the semester, they were dating. The first date was going to hear a guitarist in town. Garl loved guitar music, especially the music of Jose Feliciano. Garl had wanted to go to medical school but was not accepted, and Judy suspects that he was turned away because of his diabetes. But this setback could not squelch his search for answering that central question, what makes for health? And so Garl went into research, learning about the intricacies of health and well-being. Why does this neuron interact with that one, and what goes on behind the scenes of health? Research became his passion. It evolved through the years as he sought funding and looked for ways to publish. His research, known as basic research, involved detailed studies of how small areas of the brain work together. It's the type of research that others build upon to come up with drugs and ways to improve lives. He started out looking at the olfactory pathways, then moved into looking at parts of the brain thought to be involved in Huntington's disease and later still Alzheimer's. He presented papers at both national and international meetings and conferences, always coming up with ways to do his research while being open to new ideas and sharing things he learned with others. He was not good at being political or positioning himself for upward mobility. He was driven by his questions and too curious about what he might discover to concern himself with the politics of academia. At the beginning of his move into research, Garl received a fellowship to study in New Orleans at the Louisiana State University. Garl and Judy moved into the French Quarter, where a fellow grad student turned them on to an upcoming vacancy in his building. These years in New Orleans, before and after the Civil Rights Act, made a huge impact on this young couple. They witnessed firsthand the brutality of Jim Crow laws, the 2 Walgreens in town, one for black folk and one for white folk, the separate drinking fountains and the color line delineated on the bus. Although patterns of racism can be seen anywhere and everywhere in our country, then and today, their time in New Orleans was pivotal. The young couple promised to hold true to some central values: to treat people fairly, whoever they were, to send their kids to public school, especially in the South when most white folks were sending their kids to private schools to avoid integration, to live a more culturally integrated life. When a job came up later in Garl's career to teach at Meharry Medical School in Nashville, a school serving predominantly black med students and researchers, he didn't hesitate to take the position. Garl and Judy made a commitment to get their family's medical and dental health care from the black doctors and dentists trained at that college. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, Judy and Garl went to the city several times in the years following with a group organized by Unity Church. This is where I first met Garl and Judy, tearing out floors, laying tiles, plastering walls, and hanging light fixtures. Garl was a no-nonsense, get-the-job-done kind of guy. And Judy came along to help, but also to watch over her beloved and to tend to his diabetes when enthusiasm for work got the better of him. Garl had several jobs throughout his career, taking the family to Philadelphia, Collegeville Station, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Grand Forks, North Dakota. There were plenty of disappointments, accomplishments, and plenty of joys. But his central joy was his family, his wife and his sons, and later his beloved grandchildren, his mugwumps. Garl participated in his son's growing up years in all kinds of ways. Even though he was often bringing work home, practicing his lectures, or doing fix-up projects around the house, he always had time to engage them, reading to them every night before bedtime, attending their sports activities, including helping to coach Stewart's soccer team, serving on the board of their swim club in Nashville, and spraining his ankle when playing basketball with them on the court at home. Garl and Judy found Unitarian Universalism while living in Texas. As I come to find out, having just returned from serving First Universalist Church of Dallas, everyone goes to church in Texas. At least a sizable majority of folks go to church on Sunday. And as Judy puts it, she and Garl found it increasingly uncomfortable to mow the lawn on Sunday mornings, and so they began to attend church. They attended the Unitarian Church of the Brazos Valley, where Reverend Bob Hill was minister. They found a religion that held spiritual truths in balance with scientific discovery. A faith based in principles Garl and Judy held dear and worked for most of their lives. The worth and dignity of every human being. That we are all connected in this profound webbing of life and love, and we are here to make the world better. There is so much life Garl lived, so much life Garl shared, so much more than was ever expected for him. We always hope for more life when someone dear dies, but ultimately what has been is what we have. And what we have is a lot. It is enough and it is not enough, all at the same time. I take comfort in the words of Wendell Berry, farmer, poet, and philosopher, in this poem, Rising. Any man's death could end the story. His mourners, having accompanied him to the grave through all he knew, turned back, leaving him complete. But this is not the story of life. It is a story of lives knit together, overlapping in succession, rising again from grave after grave. For those who depart from it, bearing it in their minds, the grave is the beginning. It has weighted the earth with sudden new gravity. There is a grave, too, in each of us. By it, the dead one lives. The dead become the intelligences of our lives. Where the tree falls, the forest rises. There is nowhere to stand but in absence, no life but in the fateful life. It is my belief that Garl is now part of the intelligences of our lives. We are the forest rising from his questions, his passions, his failures, his determination, his loves. He belongs to the mystery now. He lives in each of us in acts of connection and fairness, in curiosity and questions, in our health and in our wholeness. And so we light a final candle for love. Judy, will you come forward? I think you may have to. Light this candle for love, the love we have for life and its mysterious but sure source that some of us call God, that some of us call love, that some of us don't know what to call it. The love that Garl had for us, the love that we have for Garl, our beloved, the love that has brought us together, and the love we promise to live out in Garl's name and memory. Thank you. Please rise as you are able for our final song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. You'll find the lyrics in your order of service. After the closing prayer and benediction, I will come down and escort the family to the reception in the parish hall. And we ask that you stay in your seats as the family leaves and connect with them in the reception where they would like to join with you for food and friendship and comfort of being together. And so I ask that you rise in body or spirit for our final prayer. And if it feels comfortable to you, take the hand of the person beside you, or put a hand on the shoulder of someone next to you, or just simply place your hand on your heart, knowing that we are bound in a community forming power that is strong and loving and will not let us go. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and beyond all naming, be with us. May compassion make way for peace within us and among us. May we be gentle with ourselves and each other. And when sadness gets to be too much, let us reach out to one another and rest in the assurance of those things that never die, those things that pass from person to person: community, gratitude, joy, sorrow, and especially love, especially love. May Garl's love of this world live on through us. Where the tree falls, the forest rises. May we rise in faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. May it be so, and amen.